I only have like, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes to record this, but this will be a little bit of an introduction to, some cyberpunk movies and sci-fi movies that have kind of really peaked in like the late 90s. So recently I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about, like Blade or Ghost in the Shell, and I've been just rewatching these clips over and over again. I'm just like, damn, we are missing something in today's modern movies. And I think I kind of figured it out. I'm just going to quickly go over a little bit of a list I made of these like late 90s movies that kind of kicked ass back then. And I made this list off the top of my head. So if you guys have any recommendations or suggestions, be sure to let me know. They're not all late 90s movies, but some of them, kind of took the cake. They were like the quintessential sci-fi movies. So there was Blade, Equilibrium, Aeon Flux, Matrix, The One, Tron. You could count the old Tron or the new Tron. That's kind of one of those ones that's not from the 90s. Very clearly. You got Ghost in the Shell. They had a bunch of different movies. Akira, all the Resident Evil movies, the older ones, those are better, in my opinion. You got Underworld, Constantine, Blade Runner, V for Vendetta, and Akira. Okay. Well, looking back at the list, now I realize that not all of these are, from the 90s, but they all share that like little character between all of them. And I got to say, the ones that stand out to me are the movies like Blade, Matrix, any of the Blade movies, honestly. But the first Blade is honestly the best one. You have the Matrix, you got V for Vendetta, Equilibrium, and I kind of realized, what all these movies have in common is you got some dark, brooding, or edgy ass main character, and they're wearing like spandex, or they're wearing just an all black outfit, and these guys are super talented, or they're augmented or something like that. And you always have these club fight scenes, and you got this like hard techno playing. Sometimes you got that rock or that techno rock playing in the background, and just these over the top fight sequences. These movies are kind of like that action sci-fi genre, but they were also very dark and dystopian. They had that gothic feel to it, which I kind of really do miss. And we don't really see too many movies come out with that kind of theme, genre, aesthetic these days. I'd say the closest one would probably be any of the John Wick movies. I remember in the first John Wick movie, there's that nightclub scene, and it's just you could tell it's a little bit different though, because they have that like modern techno instead of that like underground hardcore techno that was present in the 90s. Almost like some Zoolander type beat. And I kind of really miss those movies, and I think they're really important because like they shaped the way that we kind of moved on with sci-fi or these more dystopian or cyberpunk type movies. Aeon Flux is extremely dystopian slash cyberpunk because it's set way in the future. But you got movies like The Matrix, maybe a couple centuries ahead of us. And then boom, people are in like these fucking nasty geriatric egg things, and then they're human batteries. But I mean, basically, all of these movies share these similar themes. Like, there's no such thing as free will, and you got this main character that's breaking out to fight for everyone. The plots for some of these movies were kind of silly, I'll be honest, but you just got to appreciate the art. I mean, all of them had that same feel, but all of them had that unique story, or they had that unique little like character aspect. Like Blade, his whole thing is, he's a vampire, but he's also human. He's got to be this vampire slayer, and he's really tiptoeing the line there. I really like that. I thought it was so stupid. The movie's fucking stupid, but I gotta say it's one of the best movies with that kind of like dark aesthetic, and it definitely it's kind of making like a comeback. I don't know if people are like noticing this a lot, but a lot of people are starting to call the late 90s, early 2000s retro, and it kind of pisses me off because I have a younger sister, and she'll always be like, hey, your clothes are so retro and vintage, I'm gonna take some of these. And I'm like, hey, what the fuck, those are clothes from when I was a kid. And so slowly we're making to a return where all these things that we might have grown up with, or that you might have remember seeing on TV, they're starting to make a comeback as retro. People are loving the Y2K aesthetic on like TikTok, like those early PlayStation ads, and it's like, man, when I see it, it's a ton of nostalgia. Those fucking, well, I forget the name of them. Those robot pet dogs that you saw at like the Sony store, the iDog or whatever that was. You know, people are like, "Oh my god, that's so Y2K core and all that bullshit." And I'm just like, "Damn, I feel kind of old." But I think we should have a modern twist back on some of these movies, or like that kind of feel. I think one of the best representations of that new resurgence of this now pop culture trend kind of thing, or pop culture topic, would be like Cyberpunk 2077. That game came out a couple years ago, and if you haven't played it, I suggest you play it. That is an amazing game. You know, from start to finish. Of course, has a lot of bugs. CD Projekt Red kind of fell back with some of their promises, but it is one of the coolest fucking games ever. The story is amazing if you really dive into it. The world building, all the different options you have. I gotta say, it's just a game that I found myself lost in. I finished that game like 4 different times. I'm trying to do another play this summer with mods and all that kind of stuff. So maybe I'll stream that or whatever, make some videos on that. But just like being able to dive into a world like that that's super immersive, I gotta say, like, you know, credit to them. Alongside the movie, alongside the video game, there was Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which is a little bit more sci-fi. Technically, it takes place before the game, but that show is like almost modern Ghost in the Shell kind of. I mean, you're talking about like technomancer type characters, or like these crazy hackers, and they gotta like plug into their head, and they gotta jump in an ice bath so their body doesn't overheat. I mean, how fucking metal is that? You know, games like Cyberpunk, I get really excited about. We're seeing kind of some retro style games coming out. There's Arc Raiders coming out for the PlayStation and PC sometime soon this year. Hopefully, you know, crossing my fingers. But I mean, that game's a third person shooter taking place in like the 80s. And you got like that kind of disco techno soundtrack playing with it. You got jump packs. They're not jet packs, you know, you don't get to fly, but you got jump packs. You're taking down these alien crawler type things that are robotic. You know, a little bit similar to Generation Zero. If you guys have played that, that's a little bit of like a more indie-ish game, I guess, but it's basically that same kind of dystopian cyberpunkish setting. You got giant robots roaming the European countryside, and you got to like survive and stealth it out. You know, like you're taking their body parts and making fucking weapons. Oh shit, I almost fell from my chair. You know, they're making gear, all that kind of stuff from these dead robots that you have to like basically kill, or you're going to be hunted down by them. Super cool take on like that survival, almost zombie type genre. But like with the Matrix coming out again with I believe their final movie, I think that's the last one they plan on doing recently, a couple years ago. I mean, it just didn't capture that feel. It was almost too refined. There was something nice about that grunginess that came with the original Matrixes. You got people like, you know, both in the Matrix and like the human resistance world. You know, you got these crazy nightclub scenes, you got that pounding music with tons of bass in your head, and the most recent Matrix was just kind of like, oh, this is like the final adventure. It was super high definition graphics, you had motorcycle chases. It kind of just felt like a John Wick replay, I guess, because, you know, Keanu Reeves is so identifiable as an actor that you just basically, when you see him on the screen again, and he hasn't done the Matrix in years, it just feels like John Wick again. I gotta say, the most recent John Wick was super sick, way better than the most recent Matrix movie, and that's just, you know, that's a fact. It's not even an opinion. If you guys want to argue that, go ahead, but again, you're just wrong on that one. You know, with people readdressing older IPs like Ghost in the Shell and stuff, the Ghost in the Shell remake was good, but it just wasn't that good. It's like taking a look back at why those movies and why these series in the past have succeeded. it was just back then everything was way darker. And I don't know if it's we've gotten more restrictive or if we've decided to change our outlook on like what pop culture should look like. But we have movies and games and different series coming out, and if they're sci-fi, they're all just way into the future, almost Star Trek, Star Wars level. If you got, stuff that's more cyberpunk or dystopian, you're looking at like a lot of indie films are coming out, addressing those genres. And it's just really disappointing that we don't have bigger studios tackling this setting. I would really love to see some more stuff like, oh, fuck, there's a fly in my room. If we could see stuff like a really good, like Matrix miniseries or something like that, like Westworld was good, but then as it kept going, it was way more sci-fi than I thought it should be. Great Cyberpunk movie was Upgrade. That was super sick. It had all that kind of flashing neon lights, but not just that. Like you got like a seedy underworld feel, and it seems like we just don't get that vibe anymore. When you think Cyberpunk, a lot of people think Japan, and yeah, a lot of that inspiration came from movies like Ghost in the Shell, Akira, any of those types of shows. You have Appleseed, and that was like a little bit of a copy of Ghost in the Shell, but not entirely. But the underlying theme that we saw from stuff like Ghost in the Shell was just like, hey, what is the definition of humanity with technology and being integrated in our lives? And I think we should readdress that conversation topic as we get more technology integrated into our lives. We see new products like smart contacts that are going to slowly hit the market, and we're talking about like basically non-invasive or non-surgical augmentations to the body, which is super sick. If I can, I'm going to get a pair, but we got like VR, AR headsets. We have a mix of VR, AR headsets and Sword Art Online type, shit's going on slowly. I mean, I'm sure that's the direction we're headed in. But if we have that, why not create some good media from these things? I miss all of those really just dark, grimy environments where there's no such thing as really a hero or a villain. It's like it's the fighting the system sort of thing, but they're extremely marginalized as a character, or they're extremely within the minority. You always have like this super poor kid who becomes a super hacker or something, and now they go fight a corporation. And the crazy thing about cyberpunk as a genre, most of these pieces of media made in the past, like the main character usually doesn't even win. Like, sure, they accomplish their goal or they try their hardest to the end, but like, there's a high chance that they just keel over and die, or they just get killed by some super weapon made by some crazy named corporation that's both like Japanese and American influenced, So I'm just really excited to see if we get any new stuff like that. If there's any upcoming projects, y'all got to let me know about that. But I mean, like, for me, I got to say Ghost in the Shell, probably the best because it inspired so much. I mean, it was inspired by Akira. It was inspired by a lot of other older sci-fi, things made in the past, in Japan especially, because Ghost in the Shell and Akira are both originated in Japan. They started out, in the more traditional forms of what that progression looks like. You have like, it starts out as a short story maybe, or it becomes a manga, or it becomes like a weekly release, and then boom, it becomes an anime, like a TV series, or it becomes a movie, and then it just builds from there. I know Akira was a manga, same thing for Ghost in the Shell, and then we got some great movies, some great TV shows for Ghost in the Shell. It was just like, oh yeah, you got these really cool settings, you got these really badass characters who are just, they're better than the average human. I mean, who doesn't want to see them go crazy and have those nice fights with that just amazing soundtrack? But then on top of that, the really underlying message is like, oh my God, how much does the world have control over you? You're putting all these different pieces of technology into your body, and then boom, you have people like getting mind controlled because they got a computer chip in their head or they're getting remotely hacked. I mean, I just loved being able to immerse myself in those stories because, again, the reality of like, I know I'm a human. I know that, we don't have to worry about getting remotely hacked in our brains just yet. With Elon Musk and his technology, maybe that's something we got to worry about in the future, like pretty soon. But for right now, we're all just humans. People with any sort of prosthetic augmentation, maybe it's like a leg or an arm or something, but those are reserved for people who have suffered, different limb loss and physical traumas. But in these stories in the future, people are purposefully augmenting their bodies. They're removing limbs to get an edge up because, once one person starts, the rest follow. And then you have this question. It's like, what is humanity? And I really like juggling that question. It's extremely philosophical. Ghost in the Shell, super philosophical show. But then also it's not, because you could enjoy it and just watch it, drinking a soda and eating popcorn, or you could really sit there and try to do what I'm doing and make a fucking long ass video essay type video about it, and just waste my time talking into a microphone. But then I guess that's what the definition of like, oh, what does this technology do for us? It's like, oh, I can make this video. If you guys share the same opinions, you guys have the equal opportunity to write in the comments, be like, oh my God, I agree, or fuck you, this totally sucks. So there's a lot of integration of technology into our lives, and it's like, where does this humanity get removed for just technological input? This was just kind of what kicked off my really big love for sci-fi. I remember being young and my dad introducing me to Akira. I watched it on like a DVD player on a plane flight, on like those little folding DVD players that you could watch movies on. And I think I was like 10 years old at the time, and that shit traumatized me because, oh my God, when like he grows a super nasty big organic arm, that was disgusting as a kid, but now super badass. But it's just like you can always sit there, take a look back and think, like the Major in Ghost in the Shell, she's basically all robotic. And even if her brain has augmentations or her brain is mechanical, she still has to juggle whether she's a human or not. And that's something we don't have to take for granted yet. But it's such a cool look into how people define personality or consciousness or the spirituality and soul of the human existence. And I think it's really just a big topic we should take a look into more seriously, not as like humans, but for like media and stuff. I know that FX has been coming out with great shows. You had even Westworld talks about that. Is AI going to have to deal with this same realization? And probably not for a really long time. I mean, ChatGPT is one of the most, I'd say, advanced consumer AI technologies available to us, or at least the building blocks for it. But you have stuff like NVIDIA creating AI technologies, and they're showcasing that, and or Google, and we talk about these models that can learn over time, and that's super cool that they can learn over time, but we have to add some human input. And people are like, oh yeah, that's not really AI because there's human input. But they're all, with like kids and babies and shit, like there is human input if you think about it. As a kid, traditional or non-traditional families, these young kids from any age, they get influence from the outside world around them. They get taught stuff, or they learn stuff that they observe. So what's to say that's not an input of its own? In the case of AI, we're just inputting stuff that we want to see being learned by these models or by these technologies. I mean, true AI, like what, you want it to be super smart out the box? It's just not going to happen for right now. And as like a lot of people start thinking about this, or start working with these technologies for a profession, I see a huge resurgence in a lot of these movies and TV shows coming out, and I'm just super excited for that. And I'll do like a little bit of analysis of why these these media titles and different IPs were so important to help build us to this point. But it's almost kind of ironic that we're getting into things like, oh, we have to start thinking about successful applications or useful applications of AI in our world. You know, we don't want to have some Terminator shit where, you know, we got big hulking dudes coming back in time to like kill like the resistance leaders and shit. And again, way far fetched into the future, way, you know, just a super corny story that was fun. But, you know, we got to think about like serious implications. And it's just funny that these older titles are still relevant and becoming even more relevant today. Honestly, stuff like, you know, the Avengers, that's not going to be relevant ever. We don't have superheroes in this world. But yeah, we're going to have, you know, crazy weapons that'll like, you know, like curve around corners and like, yeah, they'll be able to shoot you. I mean, we already have the corner shot developed in Israel, lets you see around the corners. It's super unuseful, but like we're developing more technologies, both for good and bad applications. And none of our media seems to reflect what are the potential consequences.